There's no shortage of finger strength assessments, datasets, and high-tech training tools in climbing right now. But how important are all these numbers really? Today, I'm taking you along with me to test some of my own finger strength metrics. I put together a battery of assessments running 5 different tests. We'll walk through what my numbers say and how I'm going to use them to build my summer training plan. Earlier this summer, I was coming off of my spring climbing season with my fall projects already on my mind. I wanted to do some baseline testing so I could build an effective off-season training plan. I was especially curious to see how the assessment metrics would compare to how I'd been feeling. In the last few weeks of climbing this spring, I was feeling lower on strength and power, but my pure endurance felt like it was in an okay spot. Based on feel alone, my thoughts were to start the off-season with a strength and power building block while maintaining my aerobic base. Then, as the fall season gets closer, ramping the endurance work back up. But we'll see if the tests agree. I split the testing into 2 different days, running 5 total assessments. Some of these were for programming decisions and others were just for pure curiosity. Let's get into testing day 1. For the first testing day, there were 3 assessments I wanted to do, starting with one that required the Tyndek progressor. The progressor is a dynamometer, which is a tool that measures force. It connects to an app via Bluetooth to record its readings. You set it up by tethering it to an immovable anchor point like a pull-up bar, as I'm doing here, and then connecting the other end to whatever attachment you want to use. In this case, I'm using a block edge since I'm measuring the force produced by my fingers, but you can swap in different attachments for different measurements. Welcome to day 1 of testing. I'm going to start with the single arm pull with the Tyndek and then go from there. I'm going to use the level 20mm edge. Right now I have the 25mm ergo in, so I'm going to swap it out. And when it comes to what instrument you use for your testing, the most important part is that you're just consistent throughout what you'll retest with or what you'll be tested with intermittently. And then if you're using your data from the test to determine your training load, that you're consistent with that. The reason why I'm doing the flat 20mm edge is because I am curious about comparing my results to what's online, specifically for the critical force test, and the data is based off of the 20mm level edge, but standardizations aren't perfect, and again, it just depends if you're curious about comparing your own data, which I am, so that's what I'm going with. All right, now I'm going to do my peak force test. I just pull and it'll save it and measure it. MVC stands for maximum voluntary contraction and is also known as a peak force test. It's the maximum amount of force I can produce on the 20mm flat edge, in this case, 1 arm at a time. The setup I'm using follows the strengthclimbing.com protocol, an overhead pull with a slight bend in my elbow and knees. You may have seen other setups where the lower body is completely immobilized to isolate the upper body more, and there are even devices that lock out the elbow to completely isolate the finger flexors. Like I've said, we haven't reached great standardization in testing protocols, so my advice is not to stress too much about your exact setup. It just matters that it's repeatable and matches what you'll use during your training and for retesting. I took 2 measurements per arm to ensure accuracy, and in the second test I decided to hold a weight in my free arm to help ground myself more. The results were very similar, so I'm pretty confident with the accuracy of it. I'm gonna rest 5 to 10 minutes, and then I am gonna do the double MVC test, and then I will do the hanging board. Davis is gonna sit on my feet so that I can pull as much as possible. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Ooh. Moving on to the last test of the day, the MVC7 hang. An MVC7 is the maximum voluntary contraction over the duration of 7 seconds. For this test on a 20mm edge in the half crimp position. This is found by progressively adding weight to the hang. We are back for day 2 of testing. Last time I was able to do 3 of the 5 tests I wanted to do, so there are just 2 left to do today. The first one I'm going to do is the unlevel edge max pull, and then the second test that I'll do today is the critical force test, and then we'll put all the results together and see where I'm at. I did this unlevel edge test purely for my own curiosity to see how my force production would compare to that of the level edge. And based on the first testing day, since my measurements from the 2 test reps were so close on all of the tests, I decided to do just 1 test rep per arm for this assessment. Let's go over some background for this last critical force test. The protocol is to perform 24 7-second pulls separated by 3-second rests. This protocol came from a 2020 paper from Giles et al. Critical force is, in essence, the highest level of force you can produce indefinitely without exhausting the muscles at work. I'll go over the nitty-gritty in a separate video, but for now you just need to know that Giles et al. Found that performing 24 rhythmic muscle contractions at max effort on every pull was sufficient to find the critical force of the finger flexors.
One eternity later.
Well, that was thoroughly unpleasant. Not excited to do that test again, but I'll wait a few months before I'm gearing up to start back in the preseason and see where I'm at. I'm not really sure what my numbers mean, so I'll just have to wait till I'm back home and can type them into the computer and see where things are at. So I will see you there.
Let's run through the results. Just for reference, within the last year, the hardest boulder I've sent is V10 and the hardest route 13C. Starting with the flat edge single arm pull test. I was able to pull 100.1 pounds with my left hand, which is about 85% of my body weight, and 104.4 with my right, which is 89% body weight. The main purpose of this test was for one of the critical force grade prediction calculators, and also to have a number to work off of for training protocols that prescribe intensity as a percentage of peak force. However, I was able to find one grade prediction calculator for this test at beastfingersclimbing.com. Based on this calculator, my MVC numbers put me at a V9 level of strength. The next 2-arm pull test was done purely for my own curiosity's sake. I wanted to see how my combined 2-arm force would compare to the sum of each arm individually. You may have noticed that the sum of my single arm pulls were a good bit higher than my 2-arm number. When you add the single arm values together, the sum is about 26 pounds greater than the 2-arm result. My 2-arm pull came out to be about 87% of the total single arm numbers. One explanation for these results is a phenomenon called the bilateral deficit, which is when both limbs working together at max effort will usually produce less total force than the sum of each limb working separately. Another contributing factor may have been that during the single arm pulls, I was more grounded through my legs and could create tension through my whole body. During the 2-arm pull, my upper body felt more isolated and I wasn't able to create that same tension. So this isn't too surprising of a result, but I'd be interested to hear if you all have done a similar comparison. The third test was the 2-arm MVC7 hang. I did this test to compare my results to the Lattice dataset and also to see how the numbers would compare to the 2-arm pull. From Lattice's assessment, my finger strength is stronger than expected for V10 bouldering and much stronger than expected for my 13C route grade. My sport performance is also well below what would be expected based on my bouldering performance. I also pulled up a Lattice assessment I did from 2020 when I was focused on bouldering and trying to send V12. My finger score then was about 180% body weight, which is honestly pretty close to where I am now. I also decided to put my numbers into the strengthclimbing.com calculator, which put me at a V9 level. When comparing my 2-arm hang to my 2-arm pull, the numbers were a good bit different. The MVC7 hang was about 28 pounds more, which is around 24% of my body weight. And keep in mind, this isn't even a direct comparison. With the 2-arm pull, I was only exerting force for 1 to 2 seconds, so if I was pulling for the full 7 seconds, the number would be even lower. This result is in line with what's known about force and yielding versus overcoming isometrics. In a yielding isometric, you're holding a position against a force trying to lengthen the muscle, which in this case is maintaining the half crimp and resisting your fingers opening up. In an overcoming isometric, you're contracting against an immovable object, which in this case is trying to pull the flashboard away from the pull-up bar. When a muscle resists lengthening in a yielding isometric, the load is working with the muscle, and so more force is achieved. In contrast, in an overcoming isometric, the muscle is generating that force entirely on its own. Test 4 was another for my curiosity to compare unlevel versus level edges. The idea behind unlevel edges is that because our fingers are different lengths, the load distribution is uneven on a flat edge, with the middle and ring fingers taking the bulk of the load. An unlevel edge is designed to redistribute the load and engage all 4 fingers more evenly, which in theory should produce better muscle recruitment and higher force output. A quick disclaimer that this was not a perfect test given that my unlevel edge was 5 millimeters larger than my flat edge, and the tests were performed on 2 different days. But the results were interesting because my left hand had a decent jump in force production, coordination, but my right hand didn't change much. The gap between my left and right hand was also much smaller on the unlevel edge. I originally started using the unlevel edge because I had some synovitis in my left pinky finger last year and I couldn't load it well on the flat edge. My left pinky finger is also shorter than my right, so I wonder if it's less about raw strength and more about how well I can recruit on a flat edge on my left side. And the last test is the critical force test. In that 2020 Giles et al. Paper, it was shown that critical force is a strong predictor of sport climbing ability. Across the board, my critical force was clocking me in just below or well below my actual sport climbing performance. It's also worth noting the large gap between my left and right hand results, which was much wider in this test than the MVC tests. I'm definitely right hand dominant, and with the long duration of this test, this difference between my sides was likely compounded. The flat edge and my shorter left pinky were probably factors too. So now that I have all this data, what do I do with it? Before I use this data to build a plan, I want to first point out how drastically different the grade predictions were, both between the different calculators and even between my hands. My left hand apparently climbs 12C and my right climbs 13B. This goes to show that you can't base programming decisions off of numbers alone. There are many other factors that go into how hard you climb once you're actually on the wall. Numbers and tests give you a starting point, but it's best to leave it at that. They're just numbers and tests. Don't get caught in Goodhart's law, which is training for the test to get better at the test and not actually better at rock climbing. As I mentioned, I came into this off-season feeling low on strength and power, but my tests say otherwise. My finger strength is more than sufficient for the grades that I'm climbing. This to me says that my feeling of lacking strength has more to do with on-the-wall application. Based on this, I'll still do some strength and power work, but it'll be focused on the wall to improve my coordination and my muscle recruitment in these powerful movement patterns, rather than off-the-wall force production. In contrast, I thought my endurance was fine, but the critical force results show that I could really benefit from improving my aerobic base. That's going to be a really big priority, especially in the beginning of this off-season training block. So that's one of the values of testing, which is to double check your assumptions. My assumptions coming into this off-season were not quite right, and these tests did change how I'm going to approach my training. I'll be retesting towards the end of the summer, and I will definitely keep you updated on that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.